Good evening, everyone.
Oh,
Can everybody hear?
hello.
Yeah, you can hear? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll see how many folks join us. It's the last session. I guess nobody wants to see the ending. So we'll find out in a minute. Yeah,
Oh,
we'll find out in 1 minute if anybody wants to hear the ending. Teferet, you going to stick around? You're going.
I have to run. I pulled
Okay,
an
good.
all-nighter last night, so I have to go sleep.
Go, 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 go.
Bye, Linda.
Right.
Hi.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Okay. So we're going to jump in soon. I'm just going to give people another minute or two. It's exactly 7:30, so we have to accommodate those who are Jewish. Maybe a few among us. Good evening. Good evening. Good. Good evening. Okay. So I trust everyone is well, and glad you came. And this is going to be our finale for this class. And I'm hoping that as I meander into the next few months, I can figure out another kind of class to do, and hopefully you will join us as well as others as well. I noticed again every time I do anything that's more than 3 weeks, the numbers dwindle. We started off with 21. So next time I'll start with the last class first, and we'll sort of.
I think you should
Fool
give
everybody.
I
Oh,
think
you
you should
God,
give exams.
he's doing the 6 week now. So I don't know, maybe stick to 3 weeks, etc., because the numbers indeed have dwindled, but the quality remained very high, which is kind of wonderful to know that you don't need numbers to have quality. You have quality even in our small group tonight. But I'll see if any more people will join up. It's only 7:02. Any questions in general before we begin? I just wanted to open it
I
up.
have a question, Moshe. What is
Sure.
this? What is this retirement party? I thought you were part-time and staying and what?
I am. I started when I was 70, about 4.5, close to 5 years ago. I went into what was called semi-retirement, and that was basically for my own experiences with wise aging and everything. Not to cut off just boom. To gradually do it. So I will continue to be a congregant, and as a congregant, they said. They're willing to have me do as much as I want, but not to consider myself an employee any longer. So I said, okay, that's fair enough. So I will officially, I'll be there. I'll be doing a service the Friday night of Thanksgiving, the 24th, and then my last service will be as I retire, the end of December, the last Shabbat in December. But the congregation wanted to have an evening, so it's going to be December 16th, Havdalah. And I think an invitation went out yesterday.
It did.
I saw it. That's what made me ask.
I think they're asking for RSVPs, which is okay. And we'll see. We'll have a couple of people who get together. It'll be nice.
Are you still going to be emeritus?
No, I'm not going to call it that. I don't like the word emeritus. I'd like to remain founding rabbi.
Founding rabbi.
I think it's more explanatory of what my situation was. And then I'll ask to make sure I can stay on the website until I die. And then they can give. Then I don't know. I don't care.
Then you won't know.
I won't know, right? So, but whatever. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm working on a project, and hopefully that will come to fruition. It'll be 25 years. I think that's for something I thought it would have been a startup for 2. Went for 25. So it's been a good run, and I'm so pleased that I make this retirement move at a time when the congregation is so vibrant and growing, and so it's nice to see something you started stay alive. It's very nice.
Well, the growth is unusual because many synagogues have seen declining
Correct.
membership.
We are unusual. I would say that's a good way to describe us. So, no, we seem to have the right ingredients. The most important one is being unaffiliated. That's very attractive to people. And second, we do something that a lot of congregations don't do: is we jump up and down a lot. Somebody who came for the first Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were like blown away. You know, are you allowed to do this in a synagogue? Be happy. You know, is that allowed? And not to feel like, you know, you're fulfilling some sort of nostalgic burden, you know. So I think we get away from nostalgia and make it contemporary and real.
Yeah.
And I think that's really attractive to a lot of people.
A lot of young people. I also think the whole notion, which you started and Reb Claudia in a different way, is that joy is part of the healing process.
Exactly. And you know, I say, why celebrate if you can't celebrate joyously, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's not they say in Hebrew, lo muvan me'elav. It's not necessarily noticed on the face of things, but that's what's important, is to imbue a sense of joy, especially in times which are not were less than joyful. So I'm glad to see all of you. So it's 7:36. Let's get going. So let me just summarize one of the things, the chapters that I asked you to read. You're all familiar with the chapters. If you recall, in chapter 19, which we read the week before, it was after the death of Avshalom. David was mournful and torn, and Yoav, who was his general, the one who killed Avshalom, had enough of the king mourning. Right? He says, "Oh, why are you mourning?" He would go to his bed and he would say, "Oh, Avshalom b'ni, my son Avshalom, my son Avshalom." And if you recall, he asked the people who were going after him that they should not harm him. But indeed, he got caught up in a bad situation. He got hoisted on a petard of some kind, with his head in between two branches of an oak tree, and someone felt it was their responsibility to make sure he was dead, and he killed him, which David was not pleased with. And then Yoav said, he told him to get it together. It's a fascinating thing. He says, get it together, because in your sign of weakness, those who supported Avshalom will gather themselves up again, saying this is a good time to overthrow you. So he indeed straightened up a little bit, went back down to the gate. People could see him. Those days, you know, kings used to go out of their palace and hang with people a little bit more, especially David. That was David's great talent. Was he always retained that the simple touch. You know, the young shepherd boy was always in him, and he could relate to a lot of different kinds of people, which is a great strength. He didn't lock himself up in the palace. So he straightened up and he addressed Israel, and he asked Zadok and Aviatar why they have not brought the king back to his palace. Because remember, he runs away. He has to run away from Avshalom, and he goes to the other side of the Jordan for a long period of time. And disappointed with his own brothers, the tribe of Judah, because they hadn't come to make him their king again. They had followed Avshalom. So he was betrayed by his own people, which is, of course, very painful for him. And finally, the heads of the tribe of Judah asked David to return and continue his rule over them. And the king began to address all the people who supported or appeared to support his overthrow, from Shimei the Benjaminite, who cursed him out when he was being exiled by Avshalom, to the house of Joseph. And they also cursed the king when he was going into exile. And even Shaul's grandson, if you recall, we met him many chapters ago, Mephibosheth, who did not come out with the king, but stayed back when approached. And they all had their apologies in store, and they cried, and they begged for mercy. And indeed, David was very merciful and did not have them put to death or banished. So the chapter ends, this is chapter 19, it ends, if you recall, with the argument between the 10 tribes and the house of Judah. And the argument was over about who had more rights and parts in David. That's interesting. They wanted shares in him. Who had more shares in David? Who had more stock in him? You want to use that. Those who invested in him more. And the 10 tribes argued that the 10 tribes serving him, but Judah argued they were his near kin. They saw him as kin. And it was a fierce argument that Judah took away. And in chapter 20, which I asked you to read for tonight, 20 to 24, and then part of Kings, which we'll read together, a fellow named Sheba is a male named Sheba, Benjaminite. Benjaminite is the tribe that King Shaul came from, Saul came from, rebelled against David. Guess what? Another rebellion. And he was killed by Joab. In chapter 21, if you recall, there was a famine in the land for 3 years. And David sought the Lord and was told that the famine was because of Shaul's bloodthirsty house. Interesting. The famine was because of Shaul, not because of David. And David went to the Gibeonites and asked them if they could make amends. And they asked for Shaul's descendants to be hanged. A lot of hanging and decapitation, friends. That's part of this. And David did as they asked, and the famine was lifted. In chapter 22, David sings his song of praise, which is a beautiful song. We won't spend a lot of time on it because you can spend a tremendous amount of time on it. As I mentioned last week, this chapter 22 is what eventually will connect King David with the writing of Psalms, because it's really a remarkable psalm, whether he wrote it or not. But the attribution is to King David. And in chapter 23, David's last words were recorded. And in chapter 24, and this is a very bizarre chapter, but they all are in a way, David took a census of the people. And this angered God, and God sent a plague on Israel. And David repented and offered a sacrifice to the Lord, and the plague was stopped. That's where we are. By the way, you may have heard that there's a superstition that one should not count directly. You may have heard that. Any of you ever hear that? That they shouldn't count. So, for instance, if you want a minion, you don't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Either you say not 1, not 2, not 3. That's one way of getting around it. Or you use a pasuk, a phrase, a verse from the Torah that has 10 words in it. Right? Hoshia et amecha, right? Uvarech et nachlatecha ad olam. You got 10 words. So you count that way. Hoshia et amecha. And this is all based upon the story that the sin of not doing the census was showing a lack of trust in God. Why did he have to know? By the way, he had quite a big census. There were 50,000 in this region, 800,000, etc. At this point, David, even though he's to the end of his life, is very much aware that there are sinister plots against him going on at all times, and he wanted to count on people. That's an interesting thing. When you count people, you're also saying, I'm counting on you. Right? I'm counting on you. So he wanted to be assured that he had the power to perhaps resist any last kinds of revolts against him. But again, he is punished. There is a plague which results in his actions, and then eventually he reconciles with God.
Reb Moshe?
Yes, please. A few questions, and then we'll move on. Yes, please.
We had numbers. It was all about taking censuses, and nobody got in trouble for doing that. So why all of a sudden is God crazy about David taking a census?
You're right, because it's not. First of all, it's probably not the same God. We've often talked about that. We want God very much to be static. We'd like it to be.
The old one died off. Now we have a new one.
It's a different one. It's a different God. It's fascinating in a way to see this whole development of how eventually, after the kings, the prophets will indeed become the only ones who sort of speak for God. No longer does God himself, like in this story of David, it seems David and God have their own thing going. They're talking to each other. They're very conversational. That ceases as it moves on. But you're right. It's a definite contradiction. And the question is it because of that the census was called by David? Is David the mitigating factor in the plague. That David was again showing his lack of trust, et cetera, and David. And again, I always have this feeling that what God is for David is inside his own head, as I think is for most people who have God. It's inside their own head. They have their way, if you will, of having that relationship going. But I think that's again, I went through all the sources and said, give me a better reason for David to get punished than having his senses, and I couldn't find anybody who basically came up with anything different than the traditional interpretation, because it's not really something that we could. I mean, academics can study it, and they'll give you the history of census making in the ancient Near East. Okay, so I'll realize other peoples in the ancient Near East also had censuses, but I can't give you a better reason than what is considered to be the traditional explanation. Anyone else?
Well, maybe God is just arbitrary.
Say it again.
Maybe God is just arbitrary.
I don't know what God is. Ken, I won't even dare to tell you what God is. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, but
You know what? It isn't that I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, I don't. Yes, Jeff, and then we'll move on to someone else. Yes.
A couple of quick things. First of all, Bamidbar was my bar mitzvah portion, and that census was considered okay because they were getting ready to invade the land.
Yes, I mean it's a different time. The census is made for a different function. In this case, what we're seeing is that the census was superfluous, a sign of as I mentioned, David's weakness, fear, lack of trust in God, however you want to define it. But there it's a very different circumstance. Yes.
Rabbi, I have one other thing to talk about because I never get this across. So a lot of people criticize David, and yet he has a very good reputation today. I belong to a men's group, and a quarter of the people there are named David. So the question is why, and I got a half a dozen reasons. First of all, David was smart and shrewd.
Right.
And most of his early speeches were political, and they were also effective. David kept the covenant.
And what was the last word you said? Political and
effective.
Effective. Okay.
He got what he wanted.
He got what he wanted. Okay.
And he kept the covenant about religion, aside from the thing with Bathsheba.
Right.
But so there were no false idols of God, and that's contrasted with many of the kings of Israel, including what happens next in Kings.
Right.
And his armies conquered the pagans against him, so they put down the rule. Also, he could play the harp, and he reportedly wrote the Psalms, so he was a good guy. And he was good to his sons, even when they attempted to rebel him. And finally, the last one is he successfully unified the 12 tribes into one country, which I said last week.
Yes. Thank you for that list. Maybe you want to put it in the chat and people can copy it, but whatever. It's a wonderful description in a very cursory way to describe it. By the way, I don't know if we ever talked about the dates. King David probably lived from 1040 BCE till 970. So he lived about 65 to 70 years. He was 65 and 70 when he died. And he reigned from 1100 BCE till he died as a period of 40 years. And there was an interim period as well. So he was there for a very long time. And I think what's very important to add to the list that Jeffrey gave us, this wonderful list, is that for the 40 years he was there was prosperity. It's the economy, stupid. You may have heard this term. It's the economy, stupid. It was a prosperous time. And that really is an important thing to consider about the success of his reign. It doesn't mean there was palatial intrigue and people wanted power, but that didn't necessarily affect the fact that it was a fairly peaceful and prosperous time. And I think that really is often overlooked, because the book that we have could have spent time saying and the people, were increased and they multiplied and they had all kinds of goodies. But it's only interested in the battles, in him as a warrior, fighting those forces that are aligning against him. So this is really the major characteristic of the book of Samuel. But you're right, we get glimpses of him. He can, as we mentioned, I think last week a little bit too. He has a sense of loyalty and love, particularly to his family, of course, but even to those who have gathered around him and who have been loyal to him. So he has a capacity to be loyal. He has a capacity, but again, as I say, he has a capacity also to take vengeance, and we'll see how that plays out. Anyone else before we go into some text reading? Okay. One other point to add is King David became more a positive figure, remained a positive figure because of the fact that he is seen as a prototype of king. And thus, he's the prototype of Mashiach, the anointed one. Remember, Mashiach doesn't mean anything except the anointed one. It doesn't mean it's supernatural or anything like that. And the idea that David's progeny would be the progeny that would bring the Mashiach became very important in the intertestamental period, the period between the canonization of the Hebrew Bible and the beginning of the intertest. There's a tremendous amount of intertestamental texts before the New Testament is compiled. And in those, you have quite a few apocryphal, they call either apocryphal or other words. And David there too is presented in a very positive light. Of course, for Christianity, it's obvious. Jesus has to be a descendant of that marvelous dynasty, right? And that's why they have him move for some reason from Nazareth to Bethlehem to get born. Could have got born in Nazareth just as well, but you have to have him born in Bethlehem, which is the city of David, the city of David. Also, what's fascinating there, they say that Mary, his mother, Miriam, was the one who was related to David, not Joseph. If it's very interesting, because in those days, it was still, your lineage was seen as patrilineal, not matrilineal. Despite what happened after the destruction of the temple, where it changed from patrilineal to matrilineal, which was a mistake. They could have said, they should have kept it both, but we would have less arguments today. Both, it's okay. So that's those 4 chapters. I hope you, as I say, I'd love to spend time on chapter 22. It's a very beautiful one. And I would hope that also at the end of chapter 24, we get a list. It's a fascinating thing. It's like before he dies, he says, and I want to thank all those who helped me get to this place. And you get a list of the credits. It's credits. It's like, imagine the credits are rolling at this point, right? Until it says the end, right? The credits are rolling. And he names all these people, which some of them we've encountered in the text, and many of them we did not know about. The people behind the scenes. He seems to be a kind of person who can be grateful and acknowledge help, which is, again, another attribute that you don't necessarily associate with someone who is autocratic. But he's not autocratic. He really is always trying to understand what the will of the people is. And he's often very surprised when people want to revolt against him. What am I, etc. Because he has retained a relationship with the every man. So anything else before we move on a little bit? Okay. So I want to bring us now to a text, if I can find it, how to work this thing. Let's see which one this comes up. No, that's not the one. Try it again. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Screen share. Okay. Second. Let me just give me just 1 second here, and I'll be able to help out in a minute. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Okay, hold on a second. I'm getting to the Book of Kings, and we'll be okay. Okay. Daria, come on, come on, come on. Okay. So this is the story should have ended right there at the end of the book of Sister Samuel, but it continues on into the book of Kings and serves as a transition, if you will, for the succession, right? Succession of David to Shlomo, and
Can't see anything.
image.
Red Moshe can't see anything. Just see
You're
a
not
little,
getting it?
just a little bar across the screen.
Oh, and I'm getting the whole thing. Let me just make sure figure that out. I'll figure that out. Give me just a second. Get back to something. Yeah. But basically, what we're going to read together is those first chapters of the Book of Kings. I just want to make sure I get that entire text in, right? Let's try this one. See if this works. How was that?
Much better.
Right? Good. Okay. Eventually, I'll figure all this out. So here is the Book of Kings. Let's read together. Let me see what translation I'm using. Yes, the current translation. This is when you go to Sefaria, you can choose what translations you'd like. I'm using the Shaken translation. והמלך דוד זקן בא בימים, ויכסוהו בבגדים ולא ייחם לו. He's old, advanced in days, and they covered him with garments, but he could not get warm. So what do? ויאמרו לו עבדיו, יבקשו לאדוני המלך נערה בתולה, ועמדה לפני המלך, ותהי לו סוכנת, Somebody comes up with a brilliant idea. He says, one guy said before this hot water bottle. And he said, no, that's not going to work. So he comes up with a better idea. Let's find a young nubile girl that she may stand in waiting, take care of the king, and be a caregiver for him. And she will lie in your bosom, and my lord, the king, will be warm. I think better than a hot water bottle. But this woman, her name, we'll get to know in a moment. They sought out a beautiful girl throughout the territory of Israel, and they found Avishag the Shunammite, or the Shunammite, and was brought her to the king. Again, for some reason, it emphasizes here her physical beauty. But Nara Yafa Ad Ma'od, very beautiful. Bati la Melech Sochenet, but he did not have any sexual relations with her. She was indeed basically there as a heating pad, as well as a nurse, if you will, nursing the king. Meanwhile, I love it. Meanwhile, right, Adoniah bat Chagit, who is Adoniah bat Chagit, is the son of Chagit. Chagit was one of the wives of David, and is the mother of Avshalom. This is a child she had after Avshalom. And he started exalting himself because he heard that the king is about to end his life. And he says, I will be king. No, another guy wants to be king. Everybody wants to be the king. I think when you grow up in the palace and your father's the king, you say, I deserve to be king. That's probably the basic motivation. And he got chariots and he got steeds, and with 50 men running ahead of him. And now his father had never scolded him all his days. He never said, what are you doing this for? And he was also a very accomplished fellow, exceedingly goodly in form. And it was he whom she gave birth after Avshalom, Chagit. Vayul Dvarim, chapter verse 7. Vayu had Dvarav im Yoav ben Tzruya, ve'im Evyatar Kohen, v'yazru acharei Adoniah. And what was interesting is that Yoav, the son of Tzruya, and Eviatar the priest were basically following him. Again, betraying, if you will, David. But their betrayal here is probably out of a sense of that the king has not announced who will succeed him, which is always a mistake. You should always say that this person is going to be the one after me. Remember that you do that in everything you do in life. You should know who's coming after you and avoid the sense of there's going to be a vacuum created. He thinks a vacuum will be created. So verse 9, he says, Im even hazochelet asher atzel ayin rogel vayikra et kol echav b'nei hamelech v'chol anshe Yehuda avdei hamelech, and he's going to do it in a place at even hazochelet. Interesting term is translated here as the serpent stone. Anybody ever hear about that? I never heard about it. But zochelet doesn't mean necessarily a serpent. It means someone who a creature that rides in the dust.
It's crawling.
Who crawls, right? The crawling
Yeah.
right? So a snake. That's how we got the idea of the snake. It's what rides in the dust. And he went to a place called Ein Rogel. Ein Rogel is still around. We know where Ein Rogel is. And he invited all of his brothers, the king's sons. He had quite a few, and all the men of Judah, the king's court servants. Ve'et Natan Hanavi. But Natan Hanavi, we met Natan a few chapters back. Uvenayu ve'et agiburim asher Shlomo achiv lo kara. But obviously he didn't call Nathan. He didn't call Benayahu. Benayahu, by the way, is David's hitman. Okay, he's the guy that you say, I think this guy deserves to go, and Benayahu does it, as we shall see. And then he doesn't invite Shlomo among all the sons. He doesn't invite Shlomo. Okay. So what happens? Natan comes to Bathsheba. Here we get a little bit of the drama, if you will, the dialogues. And always, keep in mind, if this was a stage setting, it would be a big bed. David's lying on it. Bathsheba's in the room outside. And there's a lot of people coming in and going. So he says to Bathsheba, "Veyomer Natan Bathsheba im Shlomo lemor, halo shamat ki malach Adonai bet Chagit va'Adonenu David lo yada," and that he was anointed king, Adonai, the son of Chagit, v'ata lechi. So now, lechi iatzechna. I'm suggesting to you. I'm giving you an eitzah. You should be careful because you're going to be in the sights, sights, the sights of these people, and they will kill you because you serve as an obstacle. V'chi, he says, go, uvoi el hamelech, and come on to the king. V'amarta elav, halo ata adoni hamelech nishbata lamatcha lemor, ki Shlomo binech yimloch achari. So come to David and say, didn't you say yourself that, my Lord, you swore to me? You swore to me, saying, indeed, Shlomo, your son, will reign as the king after me. He will sit on my throne. So for what reason has Adoniyahu become king? Here, while you are speaking, there with the king, I myself will come after you and will confirm your words. Okay. Here, as you are speaking, there with the king, I will come after you and confirm your words. Who is going to come after? Natan. Natan's going to come after this discussion, and he will sort of certify that this is the will of God. This is not Natan's role, if you will. And what does he do? She comes to the king into the inner room. She's been on the outside, and the king was exceedingly old. And Avishag, the Shunammite, was attending the king. And Bathsheba, vatikod Bathsheba vatishtachu lamelech vayomer hamelech malach, as she prostrated herself and bowed low, and the king said, "What's the matter?" Vatomer lo Adoni, ata nishbata ba'Adonai Elohecha la'amatcha ki Shlomo benech yimloch acharai v'hu yoshev al kisi, and you yourself swore by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, to your handmaid, indeed, Shlomo your son will reign as king after me. He will sit on my throne. Vata, Adoniyahu has become king. Yet you, my lord, don't even know that? He sacrificed oxen and fatlings and sheep and invited the king's sons and Eviatar the priest and Yoav, commander of the armed forces. But Shlomo, your servants, he did not invite. V'ata, Adoni HaMelech, Einei kol Yisrael alecha, lagid lahem mi yeshev al kiso Adonai HaMelech acharav. And they're all waiting for you now. All eyes are upon you to tell them who will sit on the throne of my Lord King after him. Else it would be, she says, when my Lord King lies beside his father, that I and my son Shlomo will be the guilty ones. They will kill us. So she has pretty much a lot of motive to get David to do his thing. Now, here, while she was speaking with the king, Natan the prophet came. It's kind of interesting. They basically already colluded a little bit outside the door, right? So you go and you tell them, and I'll come in and I'll certify it. And here's Nathan the prophet. Like here's Nathan the prophet, and he comes in, he bows down with as Bathsheba had done. Vayomer Natan Adoni HaMelech, Ata Amarta Adoniyahu Yimloch Acharai Vehu Yeshev Al Kisi. And David said, my Lord King, you must have said, Adoniyahu will reign as king after me. He will sit on my throne. He wouldn't have done it otherwise. You must have said something to him. Ki arad Adonai, because he went down and made all these offerings, and everybody was eating and drinking, and they said, oh, Yechi HaMelech Adoniyahu, the may King Adoniyahu live. Li, Ani Avdecha, Uletzadok HaKohen, Ulevnayahu ben Yehuda Ulishlomo Avdecha lo kara. But he didn't call me. He didn't call Benayahu or Tzadok the priest who are loyal to you. Me'et Adonai HaMelech niyeh hadavar hazeh lo hadata et adecha mi yeshev al kisei Adonai HaMelech acharav. Is it from my Lord King that this matter has come, while you have not made known to your servant who will sit on the Lord's throne after him? Vayan HaMelech David vayomer karu li leBathsheba, call Bathsheba. V'tavo lifnei HaMelech, v'tamod lifnei HaMelech. She came and stood before the king, and the king swore. He says, "Vayishava HaMelech Yomar Chai Adonai Asher Padat Nafshi B'chol Tzara, by the life of Yerevafe, who has redeemed my life from every trouble. Indeed," he says in verse 30, "indeed, Ki kasher nishbati lacha b'Adonai Elohei Yisrael lemor, Ki Shlomo b'nech yimloch acharai, v'hu yeshev al kisi tachtai, Ki ken asa hayom hazeh." And I will do this very day. Bathsheba prostrated herself, nostrils to the earth. I love that way of translating it. Nostrils to the earth. And bowed low and said, "May my Lord King David live forever. Chai v'kayam," right? HaMelech David le'olam. Vayomer HaMelech. And then in verse 33, King David said first in verse 32, called me Tzadok, Kirud Tzadok HaKohen, V'natan HaNavi, V'benayu ben Yehodaya, V'yavo, L'bnei HaMelech. They all came before the king, and the king said to them, V'yom HaMelech lehem, Kechu imchem et avdei Adonechem, V'hirkavtem et Shlomo, B'ni al ha'pirda asher li v'horadetem oto el gachon. What I find fascinating about this is that he happened to have his own royal mule. Why is this a little detail that could be a bit important in understanding who David was? Jeffrey.
He's humble.
He's humble. He could have had a grand horse and a chariot and come out with a wagon, you notice there are kings who do that. There was a king in England, I hear, who has a carriage and all kinds of stuff. He rode a mule, which is a very, very way that he instead of driving, a Lamborghini, right? He's got himself a good Toyota Corolla. He's happy with it. Right? So people who can afford Toyota Corolla say, "Hey, this guy, I know he could do better, but he likes this mule. That's terrific." So he said, "I want you to put Shlomo on my mule, right? And bring him down to Gihon." Seems everybody knew David's mule. And that when Shlomo will be on David's mule, it will mean something that he was give him permission to do so. You couldn't. Not everybody could, just ride on David's mule. Okay, it's a small little thing, but I find it very fascinating in understanding it. So what happened? He brought him down to Gihon. That's a little brook, a stream, and Sadok, the priest, anointed him there along with Natan, the king over Israel. And then you are to sound the blast of the shofar and are to say, what should you say? You say, Yechi HaMelech Shlomo, may King Shlomo live. The king is dead, long live the king. You may have heard this expression, right? We got it from here probably. You should go up after him, shall come and sit on my throne. He will be king in my palace. Him I have charged to be Nagid over Israel. Nagid is an interesting title. It's a kind of person who we know later on there was a Spanish, historical Spanish Jew named Shmuel HaNagid. And Nagid is a military term. You will be the commander, Nagid, the commander. But it comes from the Hebrew word teller, someone who tells, T-E-L-L-S, who tells. So somehow he will be the proclaimer. That might be a good name for the Nagid, a proclaimer. And they did what the king said, Benyahu, and answered the king and said, Amen, Amen, may the king live. So may Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of my Lord, king declare. And as Yahweh Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Kasher Haya Adonai im Adoni HaMelech, Ken Yeh im Shlomo v'Yegadel et Niso, Mikisei Adoni HaMelech David. As Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has been with my Lord King, so may he be with Shlomo, and he may make his throne greater than the throne of my Lord King David. So, Vayered Sadok HaKohen, Venadavi, Venayu, Venodaya, Vehikreti, Vehipleti, V'Yarkivu et Shlomo al Pirdat HaMelech, David, V'Yelchu Oto El HaGaychon, and they do as they have been asked to do, and indeed, they do exactly what was done. They blow the shofar, and all the people said, Yechi HaMelech Shlomo. And all the people went up after him. V'yalu kol ha'am acharav v'am mechalelim b'chalelim. They're playing their pipes and everybody's very joyful. Simcha gedolah v'tevakah haaretz b'kolam. And the earth, a lovely term, the earth split at their sound. Very joyous occasion. Vayishma Adoniyahu. Now this is important. Adoniyahu still thinks he's the king. V'chol hakruim asher ito v'hem kilu lechol. Vayishma Yoav et kol hashofar, vayomer madua kol hakirya homa. They heard it. All that were invited with him. Remember, they invited all these people down. They had a big meal, etc. They just finished eating, and Yoav heard the sound of the shofar, and he said, "For what reason is the sound of the shofar? Is one in panic? Because the shofar was often blown an emergency sound, an emergency."
Moshe.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We'll use the term here that the earth split, right?
Yeah.
I can't see it because I can't move the text. But it reminds me back in Shmot, in Exodus, when the earth split open also. It's the same term, Bet Kuf Ayin. But there it swallowed everybody up, and here it's more of a unifying thing going on with people.
But there it basically says that those people who rebelled against Moshe, right, were swallowed up. Right, because the earth split open, right? They fell into the earth, right? Here it's a much more positive thing. It basically says,
right,
the earth was splitting with joy at their sound. Yeah. That if you want to see it another way, the earth absorbed it. It became part of the earth. It was absorbed. The room was made in the earth for the sound of joy to enter. And when Adonai heard this, he panicked a little bit. No, you are, and he said to him, Adonai, you said, come in. And he said, for you are a man of valor and you bring good news. And he says, Yonatan spoke up and said to Adonai, what can I say? I'm sorry. Aval Adonenu HaMelech David Imlich et Shlomo. Well, what can I say? David has had Shlomo replace him on the throne. And the king said to him, Vayishlach ito melech letzadok HaKohen, ve'et Natan HaNavi, ve'venayhu ben Yehudah, ve'hikreti, ve'hipleti, ve'yarkiv oto al pirdat HaMelech. And this is what they did. They put him on the mule of the king, and Tzadok the priest, and Natan Hanavi, anointed him, and this is the sound that you hear. And even more, not only has he announced this, not only has he had his ride on the royal mule, but he has literally, he's sitting on the throne. וגם באו עבדי המלך לברך את אדוננו המלך דוד לאמור, ייטב אלוהיך או אלוהים את שם שלמה משמך ויגדל את כיסאו בכיסאך וישתחו המלך אל המשכב. And even more, the king's servants have come to bless our Lord, King David, saying, may your God make Shlomo's name better than your name, and may his throne greater than your throne. And the king bowed low on the couch in agreement. The king acquiesced to this. And even more, thus did the king say, Baruch Adonai Elohei Yisrael, Asher Natan Hayom Yoshev al Kisi ve'eni ro'ot. And I am grateful that I have lived to see the day of my son sitting on my throne. And they all trembled and arose. And all those who were invited for Adonai, each went on their way. People who had gathered for Adoniyahu are now dispersed and they go home. And Adoniyahu was in great fear of Shlomo. Everybody's afraid of each other, and rightly so. You'll see it in a minute. You may have heard the term that the Mizbeach was considered to be sanctuary. That if you were holding on to the horns, the Mizbeach had 4 horns. Not horns you make sounds with, but 4 protuberances right around the corners of it. And if you held on to that, you supposedly were saved. You would not be able to be extradited from the tent of meeting for whatever fate befalls you. And he was afraid, so he took hold of the sacrificial altar, and it was told to Shlomo, "V'yugad Shlomo lemor, hine Adoniyahu yarei et hamelech Shlomo, v'hine achaz bekanot hamizbeach lemor, hishavali kayom hamelech Shlomo im yamit et avdo machere." Here Adonai was in fear of Shlomo, and here he has taken hold of the horn, saying, "Let Shlomo swear to me this very day that he will not put his servant to death by the sword." And Shlomo said, "Oh, he behaves like a valiant one. Oh, and not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But if any evil be found in him, then he shall die." So he's acting in a very merciful way. I think you will see in a moment that it isn't always that merciful. But King Shlomo sent, and they brought him down from the altar. He came and he bowed low to King Shlomo, and Shlomo said to him, "Go home." Okay, chapter 1. Any comments? Any things you've seen that give you some insights? You may also notice it's a very long chapter, 53 psukim. Okay, very long chapter, right?
That was the Haftorah from the last Shabbat.
This was the Haftorah.
From last Shabbat, yeah.
Yeah. Vayikrevu Yemei David Lamut. And his days are numbered. Days draw him near. And he said to his son as following: I am about to go the way, Anochi ani holech b'derech kol haaretz v'chazakta v'hayita leish. I'm about to go the way of all the earth. You are to be strong and be a man. Ushmarta et mishmeret Adonai Elohecha. Lalechet b'drachav, mishmor chukotav, mitzvotav, mishpatav, edotav, kakatu b'torat Moshe, leman taskil et kol asher taseh, et kol asher tifneh sham. Here is sort of a statement, self-referential perhaps, but saying, here's what you should do. Do whatever you do, keep Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your king, your God, walk in God's ways, keep God's laws, keep God's commandments, keep his rules and all of his edut, all his testimonies, as it was written by the instruction of Moshe. Why? In order that you may cause to prosper all that you do and whatever you face. Interesting statement. The king is not above the law. The king is obligated to observe the law. And when he observes the law, all that you may cause to prosper, all that you do, and wherever you face. In order that God may fulfill Leman Hakim Yakim Adonai et Devaro, Asher Diber Elah Lemor. Im yishmeru banecha et darkam lalechet lifnei be'emet levavchem b'chol nafsham le'mor lo yikaret lecha ish me'al kisei David ki kisei Yisrael. In order that Yud Heh Vav Heh may fulfill his word that he spoke to me, saying, if your sons will guard your way, walking in my presence in truth, with all their heart and all their being. Notice the same terms you find in the Shema, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, right? No one will ever be cut off from you, from the throne of Israel. And then he goes
Moshe,
on.
also,
Yes,
of
please.
interest, of interest, the Art Scroll translation commentary, they mentioned that Shlomo was 12 years old at this point.
Was how old?
12.
Could be. You'll see in a moment why that's probably the case, that he's very young. Another reason Adoniyahu couldn't grasp that he would have a 12-year-old succeed him, right? I don't know where the Art Scroll gets that, probably from a midrash, right? It's definitely not in the text. The Art Scroll translation is often influenced by midrash, so that's why some people are wary of it. Vigam atayadata, he goes on. This is sort of like his ethical will. He's saying it to him. Last words. Gam atayadata, it's asher asali Yoav. But remember, you should also remember what Yoav did. He betrayed me. לשני שרי צבאות ישראל, לאבנר בן נר ולעמסה בן יתר, ויהרגם, וישם דמי מלחמה בשלום, וייתן דמי מלחמה בחגורתו, אשר במתניו ובנעלו, אשר ברגליו. Now remember what he did, the two commanders of my armed forces of Israel, to Avner, the Avner son of Ner, and to Amasa son of Yeter, he killed them, and he brought the blood of war into peacetime. He put the blood of war on his belt, that is on his loins, and his sandals on his feet. So, what should you do if that's the case? You should just know that Yoav, for all of his misdemeanors, all of his crimes against me, also helped bring peace. So are you to act accordingly to your worldly wisdom, so you must not let his gray hair go down in peace. It'd be very wise for you to make sure you get rid of Yoav. You shouldn't die peacefully. It's like, I oversee this as like what Don Corleone may have said. You know, and remember, you gotta, that guy's after you, and said, they got after you. Well, if Nei Barzilai, we had a good experience with Barzilai in chapter 21. Hagiladi Taseh Chesed, be kind to him. Vayuba Ochle Shulchanecha, and let him be among those who eat at your table. Kiken Karvu Elai, because he came close to me, Bebarchi, when I had to run away because of Avshalom, your brother. And then he goes on again. V'hine imach Shimi ben Gera ben Hayimini, Bibachurim asher kalalani, kalala. Bretzet. Vayom lichti b'machanayim v'hu yarad lekrati hayarden v'shavei alo b'adonai le'mor e'amitecha b'charev. And here, with you is Shimi ben Gera, the Benjaminite from Bachurim. He cursed me with a grievous curse on that day of my going to Machanayim, when he was sort of ran away. And then he went down to meet me at the Jordan. And I swore to him by God, saying, if I should put you to death by the sword, Vata al tinakehu ki ish chachamata, v'yadata et asher taselo, v'horadetem et sevato b'dam shaol. Do not hold him clear, for you are a worldly wise man. Strange thing to say to a 12-year-old. But this is where we get this idea that Shlomo was a fount of wisdom, right? A chacham. And you make sure you get rid of him too. He shouldn't die peacefully. And then, Vayishkav David im avotav, Vayikaver be'ir David, and he died and was buried in the city of David. Now we just go ahead a little bit. Uviyamim Hashem alach David, verse 11, Arbaim Shana. In Hebron Malach, Sheva Shani B'Yerushalayim, Malach Shloshim v'Shalosh Shani. And he ruled all of these years in Hebron first, and then later in Yerushalayim. And Shlomo sat on the throne. Shlomo Yashav Akisi David Aviv Atichon Malchuto Meod, and his kingdom was exceedingly well established. Adoniyahu, son of Hagit, came to Bathsheba, mother of Shlomo. She said, "Is your coming in peace?" Remember, he was sent home. Yes, I come in peace. And he said, "Can I have a word with you?" She said, "Okay." Vayomer, At yadat ki li hayta hamelucha, va'alu, va'alai samu kol Yisrael pneihem limloch. V'tisov hamelucha, v'tihi la'achi, ki me'Adonai hayta lo. You yourself know that the kingdom is mine, and that toward me all of Israel has set their faces to be king. But the kingdom has been reversed. It has become my brother's, since it was from Adonai, that has become his. So now, Bata, She'ela achad anochi. I have one question. Mitach. Al tashivi et panai. Vatomer elav daber. And she have one request of you. Do not turn away my face. And she said to him, speak. And he said, Imru na Shlomo hamelech. Tell Shlomo, ki lo yashiv et panayich. V'yiten li et Avishag hashulamit leisha. I have one request. Can Avishag, who has been taking care of David, she become my wife? And Bathsheba said, very well. I myself will speak regarding you to the king. And here's what she said. Verse 19. ותבוא בת-שבע אל מלך שלמה לדבר לו אל אדוניהו, ויקם המלך לקראתה, וישתחוו לה. Listen to this. He comes to his mother and he bows before her. וישב על כיסאו, ויישא, וישם כיסא לאם המלך, ותשב ימינו. And what happens? She's the regent. She's the queen regent. And he sets up a throne. If you remember from Game of Thrones, you have the young kings, right? Had a throne, and his mom is sitting next to him. She is the power behind the throne, the eminence grise, as they used to call it, the power behind the throne. People come to her in order to get to the king, because she has direct access, obviously. And she said, I have a small favor to ask you, not a big favor. Don't turn away my face. Don't refuse me. And the king said to her, okay, what do you want? I will not reject you. And she said, let Avishag the Shulamit be given to Adoniyahu, your brother, as a wife. Vayana Melech, Shlomo, Vayomer le'imo, when he said to his mom, V'lama at shoelet Avishag, and the Shulamit Adoniyahu v'shali et melucha, ki hu achi agadol mimeni. V'lo Aviatar Kohen Yoav ben Tzruya. And he answered, now, why are you requesting Avishag the Shulamit for Adoniyahu? Request the kingdom itself for him. He might as well he's asking you to give him the kingdom, for he is my brother, the one older than I, for him and for Aviatar the priest, and for Yoav, son of Tzruya. And King Shlomo swore by Yehovah, saying, thus may God do to me, and thus may he add, indeed, at the cost of the life of Adonai who spoken this word. And what happens? Shlomo gets a little, how should I say, firm, if you will, in his convictions. But the conviction is, you know what? Adonai, who established me firmly and seated me on the throne of David, my father, and who made me a dynastic house, as he promised. Indeed, today, Adoniyahu will be put to death. Shlomo's picked up a little bit from his dad, maybe a bad habit, putting people to death. But, and he sends out who? He sends out Benayahu, son of Yehoiada, and he does the deed. And this happens to all of these people who basically supported Adoniyahu. He sends out verse 29 and then verse 30, Benayahu, and he said, the king said to him, did you do as he spoke, attack him, bury him, and that the causeless blood that Yoash shed for me and for my father's house. And basically, he does away with all of those who are possible enemies, who are loyal to the other sons of David, who might in the future try to usurp him and to overthrow him. So you get a transition here. It's a sort of a short transition, but it's a fascinating one. We see that Bathsheba truly wants power. Bathsheba would like to be the king in the days before they had queens. She'd like to be the king. She couldn't in those days, so she did the best she could to make her son the king, and she the regent to that king. So she did indeed have great power, and I think that's really one of the driving forces around this. And it makes me think a little bit about the whole Bathsheba episode, which is so terse. We read very little about it. He sees her, he invites her. She doesn't seem to put up a fuss. they sleep together, and she sort of, I think, even colludes a little bit with David to get rid of the old man Uriah, who was sent out to die in battle. Did she know at that point already that she was plotting something that was going to be giving her power? We don't know much about Bathsheba, but we get a little bit about her in the beginning of Kings, a little bit at the end of second book of Samuel. She seems to be a very power hungry person, and she knows how to play the system very, very well. And she has this particularly intimate relationship with David. And the fact that she got David to swear to her that Shlomo would be king is highly bizarre. Remember, Shlomo has 15 brothers. Okay.
15.
Right? David had a number of wives, has 15 brothers. Why she expected that there would be no opposition to this is really beyond me. Or she said, I don't care. We'll do what we have to do, but my son must be king. That's a very, very powerful statement. And I have a feeling that maybe when she got involved with David in the beginning, she said, oh, it's good. I should have a relationship with the king. The king will grant me great power as well. And indeed, she is granted great power. So and then we get into the whole story of Shlomo, which is worth reading, by the way. And you're allowed to read, even if you're not assigned it. You were allowed to read it. So here we are. We've literally read the life of Shlomo, of David, something that I had wanted to do for a long, long time with a class that, not just deal with interpretations of etc., but to actually read the text. And what I think we derive from reading the text is, one, the fact that the chronicler, whoever wrote this, like many chroniclers of the ancient Near East, glorified the king by his capacity to do battle. The reason David rose up and was able to be powerful, and Shaul saw him such a great threat, was because ultimately Shaul is defeated in battle, and David is not. So this really becomes an important factor of why the story is all about the people who helped him and tried to rebel against him, and all of his vengeance, and all of these people who are willing to do whatever David asked of them. I would have liked a more personal. We got a few personal things popped in every once in a while. His sense of mourning, his sense of grief, his sense of capacity to actually say, if you remember after the death of his child with Bathsheba, to actually say, well, I sinned, right? Again, not a very autocratic kind of reaction that we would hear from an autocrat. Autocrats don't sin. We sin, but autocrats don't sin. So we get these little bit glimpses of his emotional life, of his personal life, etc. But for the most part, David, Melech Yisrael, is seen as the great warrior prince. And later, in order to make him further grand, he said, not only was he a man of war, but he was a man of poetry. He was a poet. And he shows that in chapter 22, this beautiful, beautiful psalm that he writes. So he's a complicated character. And of course, there have been many books written about King David, many fictional books. One sort of a satirical one was written by Joseph Heller, the same one who wrote Catch-22. I forgot the title of the book. Can you remember?
Oh, God.
Oh, God. Okay, that's good.
Are we reading it?
A simple title.
I think the GBC book group is reading that.
Really? Well, I hope
think
they
so.
read the story beforehand.
Well, some of us have.
We have.
Yeah, I'm saying, when is the book group going to start reading that?
Listening to Moshe.
I think.
I don't know. I can, once I look, I'll send you an email.
It's all right. It's good. I'm glad that they're doing it. But
What book is that?
I would hope
Oh,
that
God.
Oh, God, by Heller.
by Heller. But I'm saying now that you're in that group, you can say, by the way, have you ever read the original story to know what he's making fun of? And they'll say no, and you'll summarize everything in a few moments.
He will.
That'll be great. So what's on everybody's agenda for the next couple of months? What are people trying to achieve in their lives? Anything good? Yes, Diane.
I'm turning 80 years old.
Oh,
Whoa,
and what date?
Mazel tov.
What
Thank
date?
you, thank you.
mazel,
No,
mazel.
it's not, oh God.
You know, in the
God
rabbinic
knows,
tradition,
God knows.
they
But
say shmonim in the rabbinic tradition.
Yeah.
Shmonim, 80, right? Is
Okay.
considered to be gevurot, strength.
strength,
Yes, if you make it to 80 in our tradition, you made it.
yes.
And the rest of and meaning you've proven that you've what can I say? You got enough stamina to keep going.
Going. I hope so. It's
Well, that's
amazing.
what we
I
want.
can't
Diane.
believe
Keep
it.
going, keep going. I don't know if I'll be around, but maybe I'll be around to, for the 90th birthday. Who knows?
I'm gonna meet you there.
Oh, okay. You have to make a place to meet, right?
And Moshe,
Yeah.
could you stop screen sharing so we can see everybody at the end?
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, everybody.
Much better.
So,
Well, I'm glad that we had this time together, and but more importantly, one of the things people ask me, I'll be very quick. I won't keep you too late. But I did a session this week called "Spirituality and Aging." All right. So I dealt with the question: what does it mean to be spiritual? I'm not sure what the word means to even speak spiritual, but is it that that aging itself can be seen as a spiritual path? That in aging, we sort of acquire a new vista, if you will, new way of seeing things. Or is spirituality aging mean that's the beginning of a new path and it's the end of an older path? Or is it a continuation of what was before? And I wanted to be what's very important to me to get across to people. Spirituality doesn't mean, wow, oh, Shabbos, it doesn't mean going into some sort of stupor. Some or ecstasy. Oh, guy, it's one of the essential ways of spirituality in our tradition is study. Study. That's the way one person said God spoke to us, and how do we speak back to God? By study. We speak back to God. So I urge all of you, and you are certainly a group that has studied with me many, many years. Continue studying. It is really the most important thing you can do now in your life. Continue to enrich yourself. Don't be afraid of the access that you have now. Everybody has access now. You can read about any period of time you ever wanted to read about, any Jew that ever existed. It's all online. But more importantly, find something that you find meaningful. That's always important too. It's nice to just study. Oh, I haven't heard much about the Tudor kings. All right, not that I really care about them, but some people do care, and they will study the Tudor kings. Gesundheit. But I think for us, we have to find things that really help us do what I think when you get older you need. And I think it's those of you who took Mea. How many of you took Mea, right? So you all know. You get to be a certain age. I could not go to high school again. I could not do 45 minutes geometry, 45 minutes Spanish, 45 minutes. I no longer can live that truncated. What satisfies me is now, as I gotten older, and I think it's satisfying, people would agree, I now see how things fit together.
yeah.
Yeah.
A sense of, integration, a sense of, I get it now. There were different forces operating, different things. It's not simple, it's complex. I love the complexity. I'm not looking for simple answers now at my age. I'm looking to be able to absorb the complexity of life and to not be, how should I say, repelled by it, but attracted to it. I'm attracted to it. Because anybody who tells me something simple, I say, can't be. Nothing is simple. If you really care about the subject, you will learn that there's nothing simple, that things get complicated. And in complication, you can either get upset, you get, it's so complicated, screw it, I don't want to deal with it. That's why a lot of people deal with complexity, because they say, I don't want to deal with it. But I think there's a certain kind of, for me, an allure, if I can use that term, there's an allure to seeing the complexity of things, to see how things fit together, how things are all connected, how the past and the future and the now, it's all happening at the same time. And that basically we live as Jews, past, present, future. God said that was his name when he met Moshe at the bush. I will be what I will be. God's name is Yud He Vav He. Haya Hoveh Yiyeh. Was, is, becoming. Was, is, becoming. Was, is, becoming. And all of us have a was. I hope you have a you have a was. All of you are here. You have a present. And what are we becoming? What are we becoming? Because I don't believe that our sense of becoming ends with any specific date. It's what we decide we want to become. And I think, as one person I heard this week say, you're never too old to fulfill your dreams. You're never too old. But we have to have courage that we might fail. Believe it or not, people fail too. Have you noticed that? But you have to have this capacity to say, I still have dreams. I still have things that I want to project into the world that only I can do. I can't be any of you. You can't be me. But each of us have that possibility. The possibility of still emerging. We are all onions with a little, all the things are coming off, and it's a constant peeling away to see what's really in there. So
Reverend,
yes.
the way I tend to think of failure, because everybody fails, or it's everybody falls down. It's how you pick yourself back up. And I have had a lot of bumps in the road, and that's what I cling to, is how I pick myself up.
Very nice. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's one of the things that, unfortunately, some people, when they fall down, fracture something. You got to be careful. I'm now taking a balance class, an actual class of balance. And they're constantly talking about, how you should put your feet down on something, how you should pay attention, how you basically you can avoid a lot of that if you really are committed to not falling down.
Moshe, the book is called God Knows by Joseph.
God knows.
And the TBC book group is going to read it April 14th. It's a really great book group. I mean, if people want to join, you could just come for the one book or whatever. It's on the TBC website, the book list.
How many people come? About 12?
It varies, maybe between 8 and 12 usually. It's a screen full of people like this, but it changes. Good. The people usually change from year to year.
Good. Well, it's a good recommendation. The reading is terrific. Any other little words of farewell for this class? Not farewell forever. I'm sticking around.
So you're going to be doing services on the 24th? No, yeah, the 24th.
Friday night, the 24th, and then my final services are at the end of December, the last Shabbat.
Right.
And the 16th is your reception.
16th is a reception of some kind. I don't know what they have in mind, but I'm hoping they're saving up for a trip to Hawaii, which just to hint.
Anyway,
I don't think so. I'll probably get a Charlie card.
This was a very good class, and the numbers stay. Take a look around. The numbers actually.
Yeah, they're not bad. I'm not complaining in any way. If I get a minion of Jews, I'm happy. I'm very happy.
Yeah, and you got a minion of Jews.
You got a minion. Will you be teaching classes in the winter, or is this your final class?
I am in the process of deciding, how and what I will teach, and I will announce it probably end of January, and probably do something during the early spring. Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm not sure yet. You work on this stuff. I'm not sure where the world is going to be, but
it's a good question.
I mean, the issue is there's so much. It isn't like we don't have a lot to do. Some people ask me to do midrash. Some people want to do Jewish history. Somebody said, I don't know about Jewish history, etc. So there's a lot to consider, and and we could go about it. I think we did the Parshat Shavua for a couple of years, if you remember, right? We did, I think, a year or two even. I was just going by the weekly Parsha, which was very helpful. But I found we read too much in class, but we didn't do enough reading, outside of that. So I don't know.
There's a wonderful book I'm reading with a study group here in New York, which is Rami Shapiro's translation of Koheleth, of Ecclesiastes.
Yes.
And, for people who didn't have the Siddur we had at TBZ, it's kind of an eye-opener on Rami Shapiro, Judaism, Buddhism. It's
Yes.
quite a good book.
Because every time I lead a service, I read that wonderful translation he has in our Friday night Siddur of the second paragraph of the Shema. Yeah, Rami was a very important bridge person when the Jubu thing started happening. You know, it was very good.
Mhm.
And I must say, I'm not preaching Buddhism to anybody, but I am saying that another way to really work on a spiritual thing going as we reach a ripe age is meditation. It's not strenuous. It's not very, it's just strenuous, but we really, I mean, Evelyn comes to our Friday morning one. You're all invited for the Friday morning one. As some of you may have more time now in your life than you had before. And it's a wonderful group. We meet every week. We've been meeting for 18, almost 20 years now. I really recommend that as well. So remember, I'm a child of the 70s, the 60s, and the 70s, as many of you are. You know, there were all kinds of ways we found to be spiritual back then, if you recall. Now it's legal, so enjoy.
Thank you for everything.
Be well, be well.
Thank you for everything.
Yes.
One
Thanks,
quick question.
everybody.
One quick
Bye-bye.
question.
Thank you,
Tom.
Moshe.
Thank you.
When you were teaching earlier,
Yeah.
last semester, you said, can people just, you know, make a list of some books or anything that you want, and then you came up with a few suggestions. We read different things, like, you know, we read Isha, I think it was, or Elisha.
Elisha and Elijah, right? Elisha and Elijah, they're
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the question is, do you have like
send me
your
email? Send me an email with ideas.
well? The
and
question is, do you have a top
I'll-
10 list? Do you have your own top 10 list?
Yeah,
Of
make a top 10. I mean, 10 is too much to really. 10
five.
is
You have
well,
a five list of.
five
you
would be good.
wanna
So
read
if you have an idea, look,
I'm not sure I do. That's why I'm asking you.
good. That's a good idea. Even though there's a side of me that wants to move into another kind of thing, like, you know, maybe.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not saying you have to teach it. I mean,
No, I understand.
for our own.
You want to send this to is our wonderful rabbi and programmer is Tiferet Berenbaum. And she is trying very hard to make sure that you know, all kinds of learning is going on. So I would send a suggestion to her as well. But as I say, I try not to study at you as much as study with you, and I would like to have some topic that allows us to explore together rather than, you know, because I never choose anything that has a definitive, final, decisive way of understanding things. I am teaching you to get more complex and perhaps even more perplexed. Because there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I'm perplexed. Yeah, I hope so. Especially the last five weeks, I'm only beginning to settle down a little bit this week, but it's perplexing because there's so many contradictions, there's so many feelings that are going back and forth, and I always say this to you: to be a Jew is to be able to have more than one idea in your head at the same time. It's very important. And not everybody understands that many Jews have more than one idea in their head, and that you know, we see, unfortunately, both sides of the story, and in the cases of what's going on around the world, there's some part of that is very tragic, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. There's no, I don't think there's a happy ending, and
would you be willing to, you or the other rabbis, be willing to have some kind of a colloquium on what?
Well, I tell you, I think that is an interesting idea.
Because all of us need to talk about it, and not all of us are as educated as you guys are about, you know, the history and everything else.
Well, we're, you know, the bottom line is that we're living in an age where there's no facts, so facts don't matter. You know, Stephen Colbert years ago in his old show, remember the Colbert Report? He talked about this years ago. Called about that we have now truthiness. It sounds true. It may not be true, but it sounds true. And we're really in a bad situation where you cannot really even talk about historical precedents for these things. You can't. No one wants to hear your version.
Yeah, but it's hard because I've had a lot of people who are not Jewish come up to me and you know, express their their genuine regret of what's
Yes.
going on.
I'm
But
glad
there's,
to hear that.
but there's also so much in the ethos, and especially the way the media has covered this thing, that
Sure.
people just say, but you know, there's this overreaction. I mean, there were only, you know, there were only 1,200 Jews were massacred, and there's only 200 hostages, but now there's like 10,000 if you believe the numbers. And it's like, what's going, you know, all those innocent people. And I just say to them, you just don't understand the history. You don't understand. And how can you just ignore the hostages? I mean, that's an act of barbarity. A
Well,
war.
this is what's going on now in Israel as well. We're not the only ones who are asking these kinds of questions.
Well, I know.
Because
Yeah.
there's no answer. So it's really
Yeah.
it's so tied up with internal Israeli politics. You have no idea. It's so tied up with what's with the internal politics. It's so tied up with Netanyahu wanting to save his ass.
Yeah.
It's so much Netanyahu and not muzzling some of his crazies on his side, who are not helping the situation in any way.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Not at all. So he's a little, he's I wouldn't say he's a shtickle Trump, but he's got a Trumpish attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're look, there'll be enough time after all this ends, when it ends, if it ends, that we'll be able to point the finger. But pointing the finger doesn't really help much. But there's a lot of Israelis who are very self-reflective. I listen to Israeli TV, and they have these panel shows like we have, and everybody's yelling at each other. But you get a lot of ex-military people who are these panels, people who are the head of the Mossad and this and that. And they're all very, very, wary of, pie in the sky stuff. And saying I'm going to eliminate Hamas doesn't mean that you're not going to have Hamas 2.0.
Yeah.
And also very few people understand the wider, or don't want to understand. They can't understand the wider geopolitical stuff. Right? Why does an aircraft carrier show up in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea? Why? Because there's a lot going on around that, But again, I think some of the people would say, well, Iran is right. Iran is right. Maybe that's what they mean. Iran is right. Israel should be obliterated. Everybody should be a fundamentalist Muslim, because that will really help the world. There's no question about it. A 22nd fundamentalist Muslim state is necessary, they would say to you. And you say, why? And they say, I don't know, but that's what they told me I should say. And I think I should say.
Yeah.
I like your idea, Ken.
Yeah. But I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you. I hope you'll come to one of those services. Come to the 30th. I'm going to do a nice kiddush if you're around. Yeah, I know it's Christmas week, but if you're around,
we won't be here, but we'll see you on the 20th.
Florida, you'll raise a glass. So you say, hey,
I'll raise a glass anyways, wherever we are.
Raise a glass whenever you can. It's okay.
Yeah, wherever I am, I'll be raising a glass.
That's another wonderful thing about aging. You can raise a glass
always
more often than you do.
I wanted to ask you about the Monday. How often? When are you doing that? You're doing it every Monday now?
No, I was just asked to do one. Not a lot of people came. It was set up by the Aging and Community group.
That was the only day.
For now, it didn't have a large group, so I don't know if that's going to continue. But as I said, if I'm requested to do stuff as a member of the congregation, and I can, I'm not falling off the face of the earth.
Right.
Plus, this is my community. Where am I going to go? I'm not ready for Chabad now. Chabad's attractive to a little bit because they have children at every kiddush at the Chabad place.
Love it if you could figure out a way to teach again. That would be great.
Yes. I hope so. I hope so.
That'd be very good.
I think we have to request it.
Okay. So who do we request it of?
Maybe Rav Teferet.
You can request. I've told Teferet and Rav Teferet about this, so they know that as a congregant, I'm willing to contribute what I can, but not being an employee, I could also say I really can't.
Right.
That's
okay. So we'll request.
So we'll put in a request.
Put a request. Yeah. Why not? But as I say, I hope we can expand this. And there are ways I'm thinking, is for instance, what if our smaller groups in the shul, we have now these task forces on every possible
Topic.
social in the world. If maybe we could get each task force or the men's group or something to say, okay, I'll do one session on Torah. One session to see how what I'm doing fits into the larger picture of what the Torah is. That could be a good way to expand.
Yeah.
The idea that study is something that's important. You can't do anything without studying, but you can't stop doing anything because you're studying. That's an interesting thing, right? Even the greatest rabbi, the greatest sage, when he heard there was a wedding in town, he had to show up at the wedding and dance for the kala.
Yeah.
That was important, as important as studying another page of Gemara. And unfortunately, people don't have that feeling anymore. They think that studying the Gemara is the only thing that's going to save the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So when they tell me that, I said, well, can't hurt.
Just on another topic, I don't know how many people got to see anything
Moshe, I'm going to bow out. Thank you.
Go ahead, be well, be well.
Yeah,
on the
thank
Jewish
you.
Film
You too.
Festival. I don't know
Yeah.
how many people got to see anything.
I got
But
to
there
see
was-
one
I
film.
didn't see it.
No, well, there's one movie. I don't know if you can still get it today. Maybe
What do you
it'll be
recommend?
afterwards.
What is it?
It's called No Name Restaurant,
Okay.
and it was great because
Good.
it puts together a Chabad kind of guy with a Bedouin
Oh yeah, I saw
on a mission,
On the mission.
On a mission.
and it was great.
I see. The film
The
I
best
saw
thing I've seen.
too heavy. It was called Arena's Vow. Arena's
No, I did
Vow.
not want to see that.
I
Too
shouldn't have.
heavy.
I shouldn't have seen it. It's too heavy.
But
Watch
this one,
that
if you
now while the
could, if you
world
could
is
stay
falling
up
apart.
now for another couple of hours, it's only until the end of today. Otherwise, you have to try to get it on Netflix, and it was worth seeing. It was really the best thing I've
It's
seen.
called
Thank
No
you.
Name Restaurant.
No Name Restaurant. I'm fairly sure that's what it's called. Let me look at
It
my.
is, but it's not our no-name restaurant.
One of
It's
the
not
nice
like-
things.
There's one right here in Boston.
Yeah, it's not ours.
Not that one.
The no name is on the pier, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
No, but that's not it. It's in the
Got
desert.
great food.
it's in the desert. It's in the Sinai. No Name Restaurant. It was the best.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Really, I mean, and it's everything we talk about. It's about studying, it's about learning, it's about two different cultures, it's about taking care of, I mean, it was
Each
really,
other.
it's about walking the walk and not just doing the talk.
Mm.
It was good.
Well, I'm glad because these festivals try to choose the best films they can find. I mean, I try.
Well, I mean, this is the best one we've seen.
Yeah.
I gotta leave. Everybody.
Bye,
be well.
everybody.
Good
Be
night,
well, everyone. Be
everybody.
well.
Well,
Thanks,
well.
Moshe.
Good night.
Signing off
Happy
now.
Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Well.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Have a good Thanksgiving.